Moving on, Group of 7 or G7 foreign ministers continue to discuss ways to revitalize peace efforts in the West Asia as they meet for the second and final day of the summit in Tokyo. Host Japan said in a statement that the subject was brought up during a working dinner late on Tuesday. The statement gave no details of options being discussed if the Hamas terrorist group is ousted from Gaza as a result of an ongoing Israeli bombardment of the Palestinian enclave. Meanwhile, the ministers are also expected to mention the necessity of a humanitarian pause in the fighting in the Gaza Strip in their joint statement. Top diplomats of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, the US and the EU are participating in the meeting. Also, Japanese Foreign Minister Yuo Kamikawa and German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock held bilateral talks on the sidelines of the Group of 7 foreign ministers meeting in Tokyo on Wednesday. The G7 wealthy nations, Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan and the United States, as well as the European Union, were meeting in Tokyo. Issues like Russia's war in Ukraine and the Israel-Gaza crisis were discussed. And for more, we have our correspondent Chris Gilbert with us from Tokyo. Well, Chris, the G7 bloc of wealthy democracies risks eroding its relevance as a force to tackle major geopolitical crises over an apparent struggle between its member nations to agree on a firm, united approach to Israel's war in Gaza. Can you update us as to what all was discussed yesterday and what is the progress made?
Yeah, well, they've effectively said that, they are aiming for some kind of joint statement by the end of the summit on Wednesday. And there's not much controversy amongst them. It's far more simple for the G7 to get in line on that issue compared to pursuing their own very complicated individual relations with a country like China. But at the working dinner on Tuesday night, which was their first group session, that did conclude in a condemnation of Hamas for the surprise attack on October 7th. There was a call to release hostages and, of course, some discussion of humanitarian aid. You mentioned things that were and were not discussed. What was not discussed was the death toll, which the UN put out yesterday in Palestine, of 10,000 people. A great percentage is believed to be civilians, journalists, UN workers and children. They also did not discuss the proportionality or legality of Israel's month of bombing of the Gaza Strip, targeting individual ambulances, hospitals, bakeries and refugee camps. Yet to be seen if those are going to be issues on the table for the rest of the talks on Wednesday. But certainly a pat on the back by the G7 and Japan included for Japan's, for example, $65 million of humanitarian aid that's going to Gaza.
Right. Chris, also, apart from the joint statement which is expected today, what are the other issues which can be discussed?
Yeah, it's very interesting, if we were having this conversation a few months ago in April or even in May at the G7 Leaders Summit, the paramount issues of those discussions were China and Ukraine. The communique in May from the Leaders Summit had a 5-point plan of how the G7 countries were going to proceed with their own, as I say, individual complicated relations with China. And of course, Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader, attended that summit. Those issues are effectively footnotes, at least in the material that has been provided by the foreign ministers so far in this summit. But of course, they are going to be important topics that are also being discussed, updates from these member countries and how they are working towards the broad group goals of the G7 to counter what they perceive as economic coercion by China and very blatant military assertiveness by China in the Indo-Pacific. The Philippines is going to be watching those discussions very closely in particular, and also what further efforts can be given to Ukraine. The G7 has expressed unwavering solidarity alongside Ukraine for the conflict in the east of that country against Russia. That came up in the bilateral talks between Japan and Germany on Wednesday morning. They will also be discussed throughout the group sessions today and will likely be included in the joint statement at the close of the meeting.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us and letting us know that update from there.